Welcome back to Everyday Book Research, where we're taking everyday things that you're doing as an author and a writer and using them to research for your books and the future things that you're going to be writing. Today, we're going to be talking about your pool trips. As we are jumping into summer, as we're wrapping up summer, as you are living and loving the summer life, we are going to start seeing more and more people take trips to the pool. Now, the pool is a magical place for authors because the research we can do there is incredible. So I want you to start thinking these things for your next pool trip. Now, I do encourage you to take notes in the moment, but if you have to catalog that mentally and then write it down later, that's totally fine. Do whatever you have to do. This does not necessarily have to be some big production. You don't have to tell people you're doing this. None of that. Act like you're texting somebody is fine. And you are going to start taking those notes mentally or on your phone as you are experiencing these things during your pool trip. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to start getting ready. We're going to start our research before you get there. So I want you to start thinking about what types of things you think of when you're going to the pool. Now, these are things that your characters could be thinking of when they're going to a body of water, pool, lake, ocean, whatever. Start thinking about what you're going to take with you. If it's just a quick trip, if it's like a full day trip, if you have to get in your car and drive, you're going to be packing different things. Most people are going to take a bathing suit. You have to think about the bathing suit that you're going to be wearing, especially if you are somebody who's going to be dealing with tan lines. What kind of tan lines do you want? Where are you going to get sunburned? Do you have specific areas that get more sunburned or less sunburned? What do you do to protect those areas? All of those things. You're going to think about that. You're going to think about the weather. You're going to think about the temperature of the water. You're going to think about the environment, if it's going to be rocky or sandy, if you're going to be in a pool, if there's going to be shade, if there's not. All those things come into consideration. These are things your characters will have to think about too. So now, how do you pack? What type of bag do you pack? Are you taking sunscreen? Are you taking backup clothing? What do you do with the backup clothing? Are you going to be wearing your bathing suit there and then putting on clothes before you leave? Are you going to be sitting on a towel? Are you going to be walking home? Like, what's the deal here? Start thinking of those things. These are things that characters are going to have to think through. Now, in that, we can actually dive a little bit deeper and start thinking about preparation for different tasks. The way that you think about what questions you're going to have to ask, what things you're going to encounter, what you're going to need to be bringing with you to a pool also applies to different things. What happens if there's an emergency situation inside of your book and your character has to go to the hospital? What are they going to grab? What are they going to do before they have to get in the car and go? I actually multiple times had relatives have medical issues where I had to call 911, get them in an ambulance and get to the hospital. I had to prepare a bag to take with me. I had to think about the dogs. I had to think about the house. I had to think about what I was going to need. I had to think about who I was going to call in a very short amount of time. I had to process what I was going to need and get that handled. Same way I would get ready to go to the pool. I have to prepare for emergency situations. I have to prepare for whatever your character is coming up with. So the mindset that you're using right now is going to talk about your mindset for your characters. If you are rushed, somebody just called you up and said, let's go to the pool, and you have 30 seconds to get ready, that's going to be a different capacity of thinking than if you knew 2 days ago, right? The way that you're feeling, the way that your body is handling it, the way that your mind is spinning as you are deciding what you're doing and how you're doing it can have impacts on your characters. So pool trip, even before you get out of the house, you have so many things that can be implemented into what your characters are doing. Now let's jump forward into the pool. We're going to be looking for sensations. We're going to be looking for smells. We're going to be looking for the way that the water tastes when it gets in your mouth. I know. We're going to be thinking about how the sun feels on our skin when it's really hot out and how we might be wearing a hat or a visor to shade our eyes or our face to prevent the wrinkles, to do all of the things, The way that you're interacting and engaging with your environment is incredibly helpful. So start thinking about those 5 senses. Start thinking about the way that the water feels, if it's cold, if it's a heated pool, if it is crowded. The way that the water moves in a crowded community pool is very different than the way that the water moves if you and your family are in your own private personal pool. You are going to have the way that the pool interacts with you being very different than the way the ocean interacts with you, the way a pond or a lake interacts with you. Start cataloging those sensations when people are jumping into the water. What does that do? How does that move you? How does it move your hair? How does it hit your skin? How does it move under the water? If you are going to be playing in the water, go under the water and see what sounds you hear. Let's say your character is in a dangerous situation and they are maybe potentially drowning or they're underwater. Can they hear those other people? That could even have impacts on your mermaid stories who live underwater. How does sound translate differently than it does up on land in air? Think these things through. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have specific stories planned. but it means you can. Start thinking about these things. What are the different impacts? I want you to really just ingrain this in yourself. Your sights, your sounds, your smells, your tastes, all those things. Get those senses involved. Start learning about the sights, the way that the water is clearer or cloudier depending on the chemicals that are in it, or the way that the sun is. If you go to the pool in the morning, it's going to look different than the pool in the evening, and different than pool midday. The way that the sun is reflecting, the way that you can't see off the water in the middle of the day because the sun is so bright, the way that it's going to be easier as the sun is starting to set. It's going to look different. It's going to feel different. It's going to be different if it's cold and windy above air and you dip your skin down below the water and you come back up and all of a sudden it's really cold, and then because you've been out in the cold, now you've adjusted to it so the water feels warmer. There's so many things that you could be doing from a pool perspective to implement into your writing, because it can be your characters involved in water, any body of water. It can be the way that it sounds. You could be writing an actual pool scene and that could have impact on it. It could be the preparation. It could be the way you lead. It could be how to deal with crowds. It could be, I recently went to a community pool where my sister lives with my nieces, and there were just children just jumping literal inches away from us, and it was very different than a more respectful place to go swimming. And the way that the parents interacted with the children, and the children interacted with us, and the children interacted with the other children and my nieces and all of these things, it can have impacts on crowds, on parenting, on the way that different characters or side characters are going to be parented, and how that then implements into what they do with their impulsivity in the future. All of those things can have impact on your characters. Pools are exceptional locations to be gaining information to then implement into your character and your world building inside of your novels. There's so much you can do. If you've got ideas on this, go ahead and drop it down below. I could go so deep, pool jokes, so deep into how you can be using pools as an author, but that's just surface level, more jokes, ways that you can be using this in your writing to develop what you're doing. Take as many notes as possible, write everything down. If you're not going to do it in the moment, do it when you leave. Once you've left, you've gone home, you've dried off, write everything down that you can think of. Just keep it in a note. You don't have to use it, but label it swimming, label it book research, swimming, pool, water, keywords. Get those keywords up top so that you can search those later on. And then maybe you can implement this into your writing later on. But it's an everyday thing that you're doing that you can use as book research for your character development and your world building later on. Follow along for more ideas on how to do this. We've got tons of ways to help you become more profitable inside of your writing and to write better. So drop your questions down below. We'll see you in those upcoming episodes so that your author business is working for you while you're also living your best life.